So, in this session I would introduce the force called texture. And with texture you can do things like this. Yes, it was an explosion. And if I scroll back the animation a bit, I will show you what's so special about it. Notice this ring here. That is texture force. So if you look at the stones here, you can see it makes a perfect ring. And you have several from the explosion. And the explosion was fast, but what it did was that it created rings from the center and then outwards. And that is the thing that you can do with textures. I will explain everything for you here, or at least give you an introduction. So I start by minimizing this. And then we just have the default setup for Blender. So select the plane, it will be the emitter, and go to particle properties. Here you just press the plus sign and change the number to 10,000. Set frame start and end to 1 and lifetime to 1000. We should use no velocity, so set normal to 0 and go to field weight, and there we can put gravity to 0. And now we change also the viewport display. So set display as to point and color to velocity and size 0.001, and then we get this. Now we have everything prepared, running the animation, nothing happens because we have no force. So Shift A, then force, select texture. Now run the animation. Still nothing because we need a pattern. We need a picture or a texture. So let's create a texture. We go into texture properties, create new and rename it. Write force texture, so we know it's connected to the force there. Now we have it and we select an easy pattern because it's easy to follow. Select like wood, change pattern to rings, and now when I did that, it's very easy to see. Select the force, get back to physical properties, and now you have selected that one, and see, so you have force texture in here. However, Blender has a hard time knowing when you change the texture. It does not update, so I think you should remove the texture, and then it's just reload it again. Feels awkward, but do this every time you change the image in some way, and then all will be updated. Okay? Let's run the animation. Now we have a pattern. Nothing happens. The reason for it is that it cannot understand the image. We're using RGB, and that stands for red, green, and blue. Each color is an axis and follows what you can see up here in the corner. Blue is the Z-axis, green is the Y-axis, and red is the X-axis. So by using those colors, we can control how it moves. However, we used only gray in our texture, and then nothing happens. How much the particle should move, or if the force is negative or positive, depends on the range of the colors. So we have a range of 0 to 1 for each color. So if you put it in the middle using 0.5 on all colors, no force. Everything is just gray. And nothing will happen. If you put a value that is less than 0.5, it will be negative force. And if you put a value that is above 0.5, well, then you get a positive force. So let's do that. We go back to texture properties and add some colors to this. Expand colors, click color ramp, and then it's visible. Now we can add colors. Black should be something that moves. I think we should use white as something that will stand still. So let's go to black here, and I will change it. First alpha, put that to 1. No movement for the x-axis, meaning the red, so put that to 0.5. And do the same for the y-axis, green, 0.5. And on the z-axis, I think I will implement a negative force, so we can just keep 0 here. For the white color, no movement. That means that we can put everything to 0.5 here. Okay, good. Now that should be a non-force color. Nothing should be moving at all for white. Now we're prepared, go back to the physics properties, and there we reset by removing and adding the texture. Now everything is updated, and if I run the animation, you can see what happens. It's so nice. It just follows the pattern. Everything works as it should. The reason it just goes up and down is because we are only using the blue color in this case. If you want to have all the colors in, we can try that as well. So get back to texture properties and change the pattern to cloud. That will be good to use here. By using cloud, we get another pattern. Clouds are not gray, they have colors. We can use these colors, so remove color ramp. And now you can see we're a lot of colors here inside, and those we can use on the force. So with the force selected, go to physics properties again. Then delete and reload the texture, so all is reset. And if I now run the animation, you can see that we get movement in all directions, X, Y, and Z. All directions are active because we're using all the colors. That means that you can do a lot of stuff using textures by adding the correct amount of colors. And that is how RGB works. We also have use coordinates and 2D. Before we go any further, I can go through them first. 2D is only X and Y direction, so clicking and running the animation, you can see that it's now moving only in the X and the Y axis. Nothing goes up, nothing goes down, because we're using 2D here. Okay? So that is what 2D is doing. How we use coordinates, that I'll show with another pattern. I'll use the wood texture because it's easy to see. So go texture properties again, change clouds to wood, and then I will also activate the color ramp. And it remembers those settings, so it's okay to use. And now we go to the physics properties. Just remember, refresh the texture. Okay, fine. Okay, now when I run animation, you get all these waves here. Everything is as it should be. Now I go back to the physics properties again, and I put in use coordinates, and then I move this force here. So just press GX to move it a little, and then rerun the animation. And now you can see that by using coordinates, or use coordinates, you see the force to be the center point of the pattern. Before it was the emitter that had a center for this pattern, but use coordinates, you'll get this. And that means that you now have the ability to do animations, so you can move your force around and then everything will follow. So if you have the animation of waves or something like that, then it's just to move this and everything will work fine. Okay, now you know about these things. So let's go to something else instead of RGB, and we can use gradient here. Let's see how that works. Go back to texture properties, there we uncheck the color ramp, and now we have the grayscale. Okay, and as you perhaps guessed, the force is now controlled by brightness. However, it's not just up and down as you have seen with the bump map or something. It also uses direction for these things. So that means that everything that touches the gradient here on the ring will be pushed in the direction for this ring here. So everything will go in the direction of the ring like this. and it goes in all directions. So let's try this out now. I have taken away the color ramp, selected the right texture. So now I select the force and I go to physical properties. A texture mode should be gradient, and then update the texture again. Also uncheck use coordinates. Then the texture will be from the center of the emitter and we can run the animation, but nothing happens. And why is that? We have gradient, we have grayscale. However, we need to use the parameter nabla. Nabla decides the deviation from the original texture calculated from the center. And we have to put in some type of value into nabla. It doesn't have to be big, so we start with 0.001 and then we run the animation again. Now you get a movement of the circular shape. However, it's not on the height, just in the X and Y direction. We have not used 2D. The reason for it is that we have a very small value of the nabla. So more nabla, more reaction. However, before I change nabla, we can play a little bit with the force. So I increase the strength a bit, and then I run the animation again, and you can see it gets a bigger impact, and even some on the height. But to increase it visually, I can then first select another texture, go to texture properties, and we can change wood into blend, I think. We can change quadratic into spherical. Then we have it like this. This would work really good as a gradient. Now we have to update in the physical properties as well. So just remove and reload the texture. And when you run the animation, you get this kind of circular explosion. Now I increase the nabla to get everything more spread. I run the animation again, and now you can see a lot in the Z-axis as well. If I reduce the nabla, we are back to only X and Y. You can see that when I now run the animation again, so by increasing nabla and force, it moves in all directions, and I run it again, and now you get a real explosion. Here you can see that you get all that splat on the side when using this pattern as gradient here. So you can do really nice pattern by using this. So that is how it works with textures. Now I think we can take a quick look on how I built explosion as well. You can download a file called force texture. So we have that in. And with force texture, you get everything here that I have. This is a bit complicated because I use a lot of forces here, but I go through it anyway. I think it will be clear for you after a while. So what I have here is two emitters. I have one emitter that is this one, and that is my main emitter that explodes using the texture properties. And I use a rather high amount of forces in this. So if I go to this field here, which is my texture field, and go to physics property, you can see that I use texture, I have a strength of 5, and some amount of nabla, but not so much. And you can see that the strength is yellow, and that is because I animate it. So from the beginning it's 5. Then when I go forward, it's decreasing until around frame 10. And then I have no strength left because this is an explosion. I want everything to go very fast. And then we get all these waves. So we get all waves already in the first frame. I will try and show you how it looks. I think I have to go back a few frames first. All the orange is the selected particles. Then I move to frame 3, I think. Yeah, now it's visible. Here you can see how it nicely has been shaped to these rings the first few frames. Here's one ring that is almost destroyed. And then we have the bigger one here. So that is what my text is doing. And I use the wood texture for this. It's just throwing everything out. And then I want everything to go down, so I have gravity in. So if I go back, check my particle properties, you can see that I don't have any velocity, but that I have gravity. However, I have removed force and I removed wind because these two I use for all the other stones. I will explain the reason for that. Because what we have here is a second emitter with a lot of stones. That emitter also have collision. So if I go into physics properties here, you can see that I have collision. However, if you create particles on a plane that uses collision, they are already colliding with that plane. So that means that I cannot use collision on these particles. It will not work. I use the collision for those in the center, since they are not touching the plane with the collision until later in the animation. They will also use gravity, so they will go down after they are thrown away by the texture force. So the gravity will take it down, it will land on this emitter, and then it will stop. So that is how my force works here. It's just a texture force, so that is our explosion. The problem we have is the stones here. Because if I had used the gravity, the stones had been falling down from the start because they already are on the plane and will not notice the collision, so I needed to solve that in another way. I did that in 2 steps. So first of all, I used the regular force. The purpose for it is to push away the stones from the hole, right from the start. So with really high amount of force, I can go into the force parameter so you can see how it works. And here you have a strength 20. I also use max distance, that is biggest that hole, and around 1.66 I think. Outside that distance we have no force, but on the inside we have full force. So I do a really hard push of all those stones that are inside this area to remove them from the hole. Since all those stones are affected by the texture force, also those without gravity, some of those stones will just continue up in the air and they will continue traveling up here. They will not land because we don't have any gravity on them. So I need to force them down. So then I use another force, that is the wind here. So as you can see, I also animate the wind, so I push the stones down in the beginning of the animation, because else the stones will, with no gravity, will go up. And then I use the wind to force them down again, and that I do the first 50 frames. And you can see that if I select the wind here again. It will decrease over time here, and then I push everything down here. Then we also automatically get these nice things where we have some leaving the platform of the emitter. So now we got some extra bonus by using the wind that blows all those stones away as well. Then we don't need the stones anymore, because then we are taking all the stones away that should not be there, and the collision has done its part when it comes to the first emitter. So now everything is okay, and then we just set the strength of the wind to 0 and everything works again. So not the straightest way to do things, but by using the force to push those stones away from the center, use the wind to push all the stones down after we have pushed them up using the texture. Then we can also control the other stones here. So everything works. So it got much more complicated because we needed all those stones around the hole. And you can of course do invisible emitter here and then a plane that is collision plane below this to solve this problem. But I think it would look less nice. So even if this is more work into it, I think it will be more realistic in this way. Okay, so now we have seen texture in action, and we will do a lot of the more advanced stuff later on. So it's all more like an introduction. But now you know a little bit how you can use it and why it doesn't work sometimes. Because as an example, you don't have color white or using RGB. Hopefully everything is clear now, and I will see you in the next session.